No, I'm not going to
Hello, everyone.
4 years.
Hello. Welcome to the Community Engagement Summit, Reimagining Purposeful Engagement. I'm really excited to just even say that, so I'm going to give a round of applause for that. This has been a lot of love in the making for today, and I'm really thankful that all of you are here. My name is Brianne Johnson, and I am a Service Learning Coordinator with the Edward Ginsberg Center for Community Service and Learning here on the University of Michigan's campus. That really boils down to that I get to work with amazing students and student organizations who are engaging in the community through service and activism, so a pretty fantastic job. Before I go on with some logistics of the day and an introduction, I'd like to invite two of my fantastic colleagues to introduce themselves.
Hi everybody, my name is Audrey Buswell and I'm the Education Abroad Coordinator in the International Center. We work with all students from all departments all over the university to help them get abroad in any way they are really interested in. So thanks for coming today.
And hi everyone, I'm Danielle Reynolds. I work in the Ginsberg Center for Community Service and Learning as well. I'm the Alternative Breaks Coordinator, so I help students and student orgs plan some short-term service trips, whether it's during spring break, summer break, fall break, no matter when you're trying to go domestically or abroad to go and engage in some short-term service. I am someone that can serve as a resource for that. I also get to advise alternative spring break and alternative summer break on campus as well.
So Danielle, Audrey, and I have been part of a planning team. We've been doing a lot of hard work to make today a reality. Several of the individuals presenting today have also been part of that team, as well as the folks nicely noted on your agenda here, all the different units that made today a reality. So I just wanted to take a minute to thank those folks and also to thank all of you for being here on a Friday afternoon. That's fantastic, so thank you. I had the opportunity to read through the RSVPs for today, and I'm really amazed by the depth and diversity of experiences in the room. We have over, I think, how many folks came in today? Over 30 different folks that came in today. People are still trickling in from over 30 different student organizations represented, a variety of undergraduate and graduate programs from engineering to social work, folks who have done community engagement locally within the state of Michigan, nationally and internationally. So wow, such a great amount of experience in this room, and I hope today you take the time to learn from each other and exchange stories and experiences. A few logistical items. Please take a moment, if you haven't, to make a name tag in the back. There are going to be some conversations today, some small group conversations, so please note pronouns or name, how you would prefer to be addressed in those conversations. And there's also a double-sided sheet, so if you did not get that when you came in, on one side is the agenda or the flow of the evening. You will notice there are no times on that. That was intentional to give some space and flexibility for some rich conversations and discussions if they go over a little bit, but don't worry, we'll get you out of here on time, maybe even a little early, I've been told. On the back of that is an evaluation. Your feedback is a gift to us. This is a pilot today, so please, we want to know about what you expected, what you're experiencing here today, what went well, what could be improved, and take some time to think about that today as well. As far as the overview of today, we're going to get started with an interactive activity in the beginning, segue into a keynote, have two workshops, so you're thinking a little more deeply about being present when you're engaged and what you bring into a space when you're engaging. We'll have time for a debrief and, of course, dinner. There will be a dinner break. And that's completely unstructured, so enjoy, take some time on yourself to process, meet someone new, have conversation, continue conversations. That's your time to use. As a side note, I will be in the back of the room throughout the entire time today, so if you need anything, if I can do anything to make your experience here more comfortable, if you have any questions, both facilitators or participants, let me know. I'll be in the back. There are restrooms down the hall, just right down the hall to the left, and a drinking fountain as well. So thank you so much for being here. I'm humbled by your presence. I'm happy that you're here. And I'd like to turn it over now to Danielle and Audrey to start us off with an activity.
Great, thanks Bree. So we're going to get started with an activity. I know that it is Friday afternoon. I get the 2:30 feeling very quickly and very easily, especially on Friday, so we're going to kind of move our muscles a little bit and also our minds to start us thinking about how we personally define or determine what purposeful community engagement is. So we have a few prompts on this sheet right here. I'm going to read them out, and as you hear them, be thinking, is this purposeful community engagement? If you agree strongly, then you can go over here to this part of the room where there's a sign that says strongly agree. If you maybe agree, you don't feel completely confident in it, but you do agree that that statement does define purposeful community engagement, you're going to come right over here to this side of the room. If you strongly disagree, so upon hearing that prompt, if you say this is not what I would define purposeful community engagement as, then you're going to come right over here by this exit door. There's a sign that says strongly disagree. And then if you maybe just disagree with the statement, maybe not as strongly as maybe a neighbor does, then you can go here to the back corner of the room where there's a sign that says disagree. Does anybody have any questions? Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started, and I can repeat them as needed. So the first prompt says, collaborating with a local women's rights organization in Indonesia to put on a series of workshops for women in that community. Okay, one more time. Collaborating with a local women's rights organization in Indonesia to put on a series of workshops for women in that community. Would you say that that is purposeful community engagement?
So we really hope that this was an effective way to get your minds and your bodies moving, and as we delve into deeper into what purposeful community engagement looks like for you individually. So to start our journey, we have the wonderful Rupal Shah. She's here to deliver our keynote speech. Rupal is the Assistant Dean for International Affairs at the University of Michigan Law School and comes to us with experience in service abroad and social change-oriented legal work. So let's welcome Rupal.
I'm going to move around, so I'm going to put this little guy on for the video TV folks. All right. So good afternoon. That was really cool to watch you guys sort of very, very thoughtfully think about what community engagement looks like and some of the issues that obviously you've either dealt with or talked about or at least done some kind of self-reflection on. I also want to say thank you to Danielle, Brianna, and Audrey for having me move around, because I feel like one of the things that's really hard about summits and things like this is when everybody is sort of sitting the entire time and absorbing in just one way. So it's really great to have all of that possible. I'm also going to move around too, both for my own sake, but also for yours, so you're not stuck looking at me, because some of these slides are actually kind of fun. I also wanted to acknowledge, and we'll do this maybe through the next couple of slides, who's actually in the room. I heard Brianna say that a lot of you come with service experience, but it'd be nice for you to know that about each other, and for me to know that as well. So, as somebody who spent a decade doing service projects in India, I'm going to talk a little bit about the hippo in the room. But before that, I want to talk a little bit about you. So, how many of you have actually done service abroad? You should look around too, huh? This was important. Great. And how many of you have done service domestically, pretty regularly? Who's kind of committed in the service field? Wow, okay. A nice group. People who have done service trips, alternative spring break, other trips, okay? And since you did some of you did it abroad, those of you who actually did it individually, particularly on your own, not through a program. Okay, fabulous. So as Brianna said earlier, I think there probably are a lot of really great stories and experiences for you to share, and so hopefully we'll make some time over the dinner break and through some of the more engaged interactive sessions that you'll hear Shari and Amy do. So I like the word of community engagement, and it's something that we at the University of Michigan talk a lot about. I think we take a lot of pride in, right? We're sort of, I love this flag. There's a group that's sort of conquering wherever they are, maybe China. But there's something about sort of being sort of proud of having this reputation that sometimes makes us a little less careful. I think there's the danger that when you're proud of something, somebody like me who rides bikes a lot but forgets to wear her helmet or pushes her front brake when she's going down a hill and therefore landing on my head is something that happens when you get a little overconfident. Which is why we're coming to this hippo in the room. I'm going to show you a short TED video. Maybe some of you have seen it. It's a clip from Ernesto Ciroli, and he's going to talk a little bit about his time working at the age of 21 with an Italian NGO.
Every single project that we set up in Africa failed. And I was distraught. I thought, age 21, that we Italians were good people and we were doing good work in Africa. Instead, everything we touched, we killed. Our first project, the one that has inspired my first book, Ripples from the Zambezi, was a project where we Italians decided to teach Zambian people how to grow food. So we arrived there with Italian seeds in southern Zambia, in this absolutely magnificent valley going down to the Zambezi River, and we taught the local people how to grow Italian tomatoes and zucchini. And of course the local people had absolutely no interest in doing that, so we paid them to come and work, and sometimes they would show up. And we were amazed that the local people in such fertile valley would not have any agriculture. And, but instead of asking them how come they were not growing anything, we simply said, thank God we're here. Just in the nick of time to save the Zambian people from starvation. And of course, everything in Africa grew beautifully, and we had these magnificent tomatoes. In Italy, a tomato would grow to this size, in Zambia to this size. And we could not believe. And we were telling the Zambians, look how easy agriculture is. When the tomatoes were nice and ripe and red, overnight, some 200 hippos came out from the river and they ate everything. And we said to the Zambians, my God, the hippos! And the Zambians said, yes, that's why we have no agriculture here. Why didn't you tell us? You never asked.
I love this video. I think I've seen it 100 times in preparing for this talk, and every time I sort of laugh. So it was fun to hear some of the laughter in the room. What's really interesting about this video, though, is most of the time we hear stuff like this and we think, that's like, you know, juvenile. People don't do that anymore. We know better, right? And I have to say, so you guys heard my sort of law school creds and why I'm here, but actually I spent 10 years working with an organization that my siblings and I founded called Indicor, and I've lost this guy. And Indicor actually brought people of Indian origin back to India, which seems like it makes some sense, to do service for a year to get to know their cultural heritage. And we had a ton of hippos in the room. So I'm going to give you a couple stories from our Indicor years and get you to help me spot the hippos to see if you can figure out why some of these errors, or I guess stuff that happens, so that we can think a little bit about how we would do it differently. Some of the stories I'm going to share with you are in a book called Journeys in Service, and we have copies for you guys to take home with you at the end of today's summit. So, my stories are actually going to be threefold. I've got one sort of at a global macro level, one at a project level, and one on an individual personal level. And the first story is about an earthquake that happened in Kutch. So in 2001, actually on a holiday, January 26th, India's Independence Day, there was a huge earthquake that killed about 20,000 people. A couple 100,000 were also injured, and about 500,000 homes were destroyed. And so Indicor didn't actually start until a year and a half later, but we did rehabilitation projects. We built some check dams, we worked on a rural design school. But we got sort of front row seats to what had happened post-earthquake with some of the billions of dollars that had come to India for disaster relief. And so this is a story about a small sort of, I guess it's a village, maybe a town called Khavda. It's about 50 kilometers from the border of Pakistan. And the houses looked a little bit like this. They're bungas, which are these round mud huts with a, I guess, a grass rooftop. And they're sort of in these small familial clusters. And after the earthquake, there were lots of people who came to do sort of construction on homes because, as I said, 500,000 homes were destroyed. And so lots of people used really durable materials, things that would withstand the climactic conditions a lot sort of better than the mud huts. And it was helpful. I mean, obviously, housing is good. But can anybody look at the picture on the left and tell me what might be a hippo in that situation? What issues you see with the housing? Yes, please.
They're not in any kind of familial blocks.
Okay. And why does that matter?
Networks.
Cool. We'll come back to that. Anybody else?
I was going to say culture.
Culture. These are great. Any more?
I mean, sort of like the familial blocks thing. I mean, if you have like clusters and there's some sort of privacy between each one, but with like a row of houses, you can just look down the entire street, it's just a different feel.
These are great. So did you guys hear him? Okay. One more?
And it sort of ignores the fact that maybe building the homes with like a sense of pride or a sense of tradition among families, and now that's sort of non-existent.
You guys are great. So some of the great things about these houses over here on the left is they actually had electricity, they had bathrooms, things the former houses didn't. But what you're touching upon is really, really key. So the women that lived in these bungas are from a Muslim faith that actually didn't allow them to leave sort of a familial space. So what ended up happening was that it changed the women's sort of gender kind of dynamic in these familial lines, because instead of having a group of houses they could hang out at, they were sort of confined to their own homes. So it really and truly changed the woman's experience in Kutch with when these homes were built. And lots of people ended up not living in those homes. They ended up using them as storage and moved back to their bungas because they could make those on their own. All right, good job. Good job on the hippo spotting. The second one I want to share is sort of more on a project level. This is a solar lighting project in Karnataka, and the fellow, Naveen Lakshmipati, actually ended up coming to Ross Business School and graduated here with an MBA. He's currently working on alternative energy issues in California. So Naveen was going to do a one-year project, but ended up staying for 2 because his project didn't go as fast as he had hoped. So he was working with an organization, so all of our projects in Indicor were in partnership with community organizations. And so he was working with an organization called S-Cubed IDF, which has something to do with small-scale rural infrastructure design. And S-Cubed IDF was actually trying to work with people who were street vendors or people who had small shops and were using kerosene to light their wares in the evenings. And has anybody ever been to a shop with kerosene as the lighting infrastructure? What's the problem with kerosene? It smells bad, one. But what else?
Bad for your lungs.
Bad for your lungs, so it's got health issues. It's actually relatively expensive, interestingly enough. And it's not so great for especially if you're selling fruits and vegetables, it's not so great for your wares. The same kind of fumes that infect you affect sort of your produce. So the idea of using solar lighting instead seemed to make lots of sense. And all kinds of organizations are making fabulous affordable solar lighting in India. So Naveen, as he's going to these communities and talking to them about how solar would really improve their lives and help them out, spent a lot of time get really frustrated actually because he couldn't convince anybody to switch over. Any thoughts on what the hippo in the room was there, like why Naveen would struggle in terms of, and one of the things I should let you know is the solar lighting would pay itself off multiply in 3 months. So it was even economically beneficial. spent a couple of hours on this one and couldn't figure it out. So I'm not completely surprised you're a little stuck, but throw some things out.
It might need some maintenance in terms of putting it in a sunny place every day. You just have to make sure that's part of the schedule.
Okay, so one might, maybe there's not, if so maybe it's not a great idea, but second, maybe there's some maintenance issues.
Maybe by buying the kerosene from somebody inside the community helped another part of the community.
Okay, so maybe the networks that you have are sort of have importance in terms of just livelihoods. Anything else? These are good. Hang on, come back to you. How about somebody in the back table? Great.
You use kerosene for other things besides lighting.
That's true. Kerosene's sort of multi-purposed versus the solar. Back to you.
If they break, are there sources for replacements or replacement parts?
That's great. If they break, what next? Okay, these are good. So a lot of this was at play. The issue was largely that it wasn't necessarily a local organization that was backing it for lots of reasons. One, they've seen some fly-by-night operations come through with brilliant ideas come in before that somehow over long term cost them stuff. Second, even though there's plenty of sunshine in Karnataka, most of these vendors actually live sort of day to day. So what they make as an income, they spend tomorrow. So they don't actually buy kerosene in like a truckload, they buy the exact amount for the next day. So even if they were going to be able to get a loan to pay for the solar energy, which was going to pay itself off in 3 months, the idea of whether or not that made sense has a lot to do with its sustainability. Are you going to be around in a year when I need a part? And are you going to, like, where am I going to go? And then what if you don't show up and my kerosene guy no longer sells to me because he has other customers? So it's a lot to do with the idea of whether or not it's local and there are livelihoods that are around it. Because it's not just me who I think about, it's the idea that all of us are sort of codependent. So, so then Naveen and his organization ended up working with the women's self-help groups to sponsor some lights, and it still took a little while, but it was an interesting process. So my last example is one that's on a much more individual level. It's one I know really well, because I might have thought it was a good idea at the time. So this is with the Earn and Learn program at the Gandhi Ashram. And I'm going to introduce some of the children who are part of that organization. These kids are part of a group that Sadhana works with, and they are mostly rag pickers, people who sort of collect plastic recyclables, or they're boot polishers, or they work with their families in whatever their family's livelihood is, things like pottery or whatever it is that the family does to earn a living. So some of them don't go to school quite as regularly. So Sadhana started a program to allow them to go to school and then come after school to make cards or bags, things that were kind of fun and sort of in a supportive group environment that they could do after school. And they would pay them so they would have enough money that they are sort of foregoing by going to school. And we had a couple of fellows with Sadhana. One was actually doing something to broaden their product markets, trying to see if we could sell them on the internet. This was back in 2002 when it was not quite so popular. The other project was to improve slum life. So they were to get to know these kids and to figure out what kinds of things we could do to sort of help make their experience and even sort of their creativity more lively. And two of our fellows actually couldn't speak so much Gujarati. We did learn a little bit of Gujarati, and so they were thinking of innovative ways how they could connect to the students without necessarily being able to have a full-on conversation about, deep things. So one of the things they came up with was this. What is this? Anybody? Say it loud. Thumb wars. Has anybody done thumb wars before? Yeah? Raise your hand if you've done a thumb war thing. Okay, so most of you are familiar. Those of you who are not familiar, it's basically one of these things. I take your hand, and we try to figure out who's going to get the other person. So it's kind of fun. If you look at her face, she's actually smiling a lot. And it's really fun because you can't help but giggle, because it's a little bit silly. And so it seems ingenious. Anything that makes this kind of a pretty brilliant move if you don't speak the language? Help me out. I thought it was pretty brilliant when we started it. Someone?
Physical contact.
Physical contact. What else? One more time? It's a game. Games are fun. Doesn't cost anything. Didn't have to bring any stuff.
It kind of unites people and kind of breaks the ice and like breaks something down between them, that like the barrier between them.
That's right. It's an icebreaker and it breaks barriers down, right? Especially because it's sort of pretty silly. Except that it's in a country where people often put their hands together to greet each other. So you can imagine what people holding hands sort of had happen in other people's heads. What are those two doing holding their hands? And so, we still think anything of it, whatever. It's still fun, and boys and girls doing it, girls and girls doing it, it's all is good. No issues. And then we started to figure out, well, we didn't actually figure out anything. We were there for a year, right? And so we noticed that less and less girls were coming to Manasadna and to the Earn and Learn program. We weren't quite sure why. Oops. And so, as they were disappearing, we went into the community to talk to Himangini and her family, and we talked to Himangini's parents about why she and her sister weren't coming to the program anymore. And Himangini's parents said, "We can't get my daughter married in a community where girls and boys don't hold hands when what you've done is have them run around, not just at your program, but around our sort of community at the Tegro holding hands." So the hippo in the room sometimes isn't something that you entirely plan, or it's not something that is so obvious. But it's an important thing to sort of pay attention to, right? And I guess you're probably wondering, well, gosh, you have all these experiences, so do you have some solutions? Do you have some kinds of strategies that perhaps we can use to spot the hippo? So at Indicor, we trained our fellows, because again, it was a year-long program, in ways that they could think about sort of very, very thoughtful community engagement. And I should let you know that all the examples I just gave you were from Indicor fellows. So you know that even after they got the training, it wasn't entirely foolproof. So I'm not telling you that if you do the things that we say that you're going to definitely not have to have the hippo. But I think it's important to know that even when sometimes the hippo shows up, you can still provide something to the community. So the three main things that we talked about, and this is one that was something that we spoke about a lot at Indicor, was look, listen, and learn. And even our year-long projects, our first 3 months, that was their assignment. They were supposed to just do this for the entire first 3 months. But it was something that we emphasized actually for the duration of their year. The second is cultural humility and respect. You'll hear Shari, who's in the back of the room, speak about cultural humility a little bit later. But what I want to emphasize is respect. I guess it's really important to remember, and some of you seem to have mentioned this when you were in the spaces around the room, that the communities are the experts in their own lives and their own communities, right? I mean, they know how things work and who does what, and so not forgetting that, I think, is super important when we go someplace and think something can be done better, right? Because it's important to know that they are the teachers, and perhaps we can enter as maybe engaged students who bring a fresh set of eyes to a problem, and not necessarily folks who have something to leave with them. My absolute favorite one is this, and this is something you sort of seem to mention. What's your name?
Mike.
Yeah, Mike. When you were talking about projects and what our intention is for doing projects. So at Indicor, we spent a lot of time emphasizing this idea of living your values and not your to-do list. And I think that's super important because no matter how organized you are, and I know that Amy is going to do some conversations about walking into communities with a purposeful, a statement of what your purpose is. I imagine if you're going in with a school organization or even on your own, you've done some reflection of how you think your project is going to progress, but almost nothing. Maybe. Lots of things in international spaces in particular don't go the way you planned, right? And so the one thing that you get to bring to the space is sort of your very authentic presence. And I think authentic presence isn't simply however you show up, but it's thinking about how you want to show up. And especially when you're at a crossroads, what value do you actually want to manifest? So I'm going to share one more video and a story of a friend of mine. This is Sonia Somnath. She's going to tell you a little bit about the values she wanted to manifest. But she has a really interesting story. I'll tell you the first part before and then have her speak and then tell you a little bit afterwards. She looks really young. She's actually 31 in this video. And she had gone to India having already started her own NGO in Tucson, Arizona with her husband, and being a project leader for a lot of organizational projects with Engineers Without Borders. She's a structural engineer. And so she came to India to do a sanitation project. Her goal was to build a lot of toilets. But you'll get to hear what she feels like she ended up doing. So here's Sonia. If I can figure out how to use the computer.
I want to lead a fearless life, a life of energy and daring. Big words. I don't always know what that means. This year, I built toilets with angry masons and drunk carpenters. I mimed my way through a Bengali village where I didn't speak any of the local languages, and I picked up trash alongside skeptical village elders. It doesn't sound like much when I say it like that. It's small stuff. It's the big deal. But in the context of a year, in the context of a life, my life, this year of service was so important. I remembered that being fearless, a really big word, comes down to just small, small things. I led a fearless life this year, even when I was confused, tired, and voiceless. I will continue to do that. There's nothing small about that.
There's also nothing small about the fact that she actually did build 54 toilets and worked with a community that had a canal at the center, and she worked not only on water sanitation, but people throwing trash, et cetera, et cetera. But the important thing is that there's lots of ripple effects that sometimes we don't see. So a year after Sonia left her project, one of her village friends, Suganya, who had never left his village before, called her and told her that he was going to Ethiopia to train some folks in organic farming techniques. And she was like, what? She's like, you've never left your village before. How are people go to Ethiopia? You don't know the language, you don't know the people? And he's like, you didn't know our language, you didn't know our people, and you did just fine. So it was really cool because her ability to sort of be fearless and sort of what he took away from her project wasn't simply the help that she could bring, but sort of the spirit in which she came. So, my last animation slide. I've lost my paper. Anyway, so you're going to hear from some great folks today who are going to talk about purpose statements, who are going to talk about cultured humility, and who are going to tell you about what it's like to enter and exit communities respectfully. And it seems like a lot of you already have some of those seeds in you. I'm going to encourage that you think about the hippo in the room. Again, not because it's so obvious and because if you didn't, you weren't well prepared. But as you think about the hippo in the room, I want you to think about what you want to keep in your pocket, like what values you want to manifest, so that when you plant seeds in the communities that you go to, that you'll be proud of whatever it is that blossoms, even years after you spend some time in the community. And I want to thank you for being here, because it's really great to see so many engaged folks. Thank you.
Good afternoon. How is everyone? It's a Friday. Yes. It's 4:10. I'm tired. I'm going to be honest. I'm going to own that. But I'm going to give you lots of energy in the next 50 minutes. So hopefully my energy feeds your energy. How does that sound? Good? Okay. Excellent. I'm so glad to hear it. So I'm going to do some hands-on work with you in the next 50 minutes around thinking about what motivates you, what engages you, who you are, and how that connects to the kinds of community engagement experiences you want to have or are planning on having or have had. So to start, I want to talk a little bit about why I'm here, right? So why did someone like me, who does my set of work around things like reflective practice and meaning making and thinking about big existential questions about who you are, why would I be in this room? So one of what we know about reflection is that it doesn't happen on its own. So we all have a lot to do all of the time, right? So we don't necessarily have a lot of time to ask one another, tell me who you are. Talk to me a little bit about your value system. And if you are having these conversations in everyday life, major kudos to you. Please come see me afterwards, because you certainly would be the exception, I think, not the rule. So reflection doesn't happen on its own, and that's what the research tells us too. We don't necessarily give a lot of dedicated time and space to meaning making. But meaning making is extraordinarily important, right? It's really important that we understand who we are, what our motivations are, and how we're going to show up to the kinds of engagement experiences that we have. So that's one of the reasons that I'm here. Another reason I'm here is to provide some scaffolding to this process. So I could come in this room and I could say, okay, I'm going to have you do some reflection for 50 minutes. Go do some reflection. But chances are, we might stay in a pretty surface level space around the quality of that reflection. And so why I'm here is to help you dig deep, but to do that really quickly, right? Because I only have 50 minutes to help you do that. So we're going to move from surface level reflection, here's a little bit about who I am, here's some things I'm thinking about, to really deep reflection. These are core fundamental elements to who I am, to what motivates me, to how I would define myself. Really fast. That's cool, right? You're like, yes, I'm so excited about doing reflective practice. All right, good. So the first thing that we're going to do is I'm going to help all of us be present in this space. So we talk a lot about the notion of being mindful and present, and that's incredibly difficult to do, particularly in the United States, because distractions abound, right? Technological distractions, social distractions, etc., and because we all have so much going on. So another area that I'm really interested in, that I'm not going to go into today, is around what we call the culture of busy. So we talk about how busy we are, and how many things that we have to do, and how many places that we have to go, and in that we don't necessarily fully show up anywhere. So I want to support all of you in being fully present in this space together, and I want to model to you what we call presence pedagogy, or how to be present, because that's exactly what I want you to do in the communities that you're engaging. I want you to be in these communities and to be fully present with people, right? Not distracted, not off somewhere else, but physically located there, but truly, deeply to be present with people. Just like we're going to be truly, deeply in community and in presence with each other today. How does that sound? It's like, yes, awesome. Okay, good. So I'm going to ask you to do a series of exercises. The first one, some of you might be like, this is kind of strange, and that's totally okay. If you're not familiar with, if you don't do things like meditation or meditative practice often. But the first thing that we're going to do to center ourselves and to be present is to close our eyes. So everyone close your eyes. And I know this can be a little bit uncomfortable because we're in a space with a lot of other people, so I'm going to acknowledge that. And if you really don't feel comfortable closing your eyes, I'm totally okay with that. Okay, so now I want each of you to take one deep breath. So I want you to inhale and count to 3. So inhale, 1, 2, 3, and then I want you to exhale for 3. 1, 2, 3. I want you to inhale again, and I want you to feel your breath. 1, 2, 3. And I want you to exhale for 3. I want you to feel how the breath exhales from the body. I want you to take one more breath in. This time I want you to feel your body. So we're achieving embodiedness, connecting the mind to the body. Feel the weight of your body in your seats. Feel the feet, your feet, touching the floor. And I want you to exhale for 3. Inhale for 3, focusing just on the breath. If you have a thought, Don't try to squash it. Let it pass like a cloud floating by. And then exhale for 3. Now I'm going to invite us to sit in silence for a minute. I'm going to time it. I promise you when you open your eyes, I'm still going to be here. So we're going to take 1 minute of silence and practice our breath. When you're ready, open your eyes. How does everyone feel? Centered? Present? Excellent. Okay. So now that we're feeling present and centered, we're going to start to move through a series of reflections. So the first thing that we're going to do is written reflection. So on your tables, there is a Community Engagement Summit Purposeful Engagement Statement worksheet. So pass that around. And while you're doing that, let me talk a little bit about why we do written reflection. I'm a person, and I'll own this too, that doesn't particularly enjoy writing. I blame being left-handed on that. So this is really difficult for me to do, but written reflection is really essential because it gives us an opportunity to engage a learning process of visualization. So I'm writing, and then I'm looking at and I'm reflecting on my own writing. So even though this might be hard for some of us to do, there's a lot of utility in first approaching our statement process in writing. The second caveat that I want to add is often when I do this work, I'll say something like this, just what I'm going to say to all of you. We're going to do internal written reflection first, and what will happen is I'll start hearing conversations. Because again, it's hard for some of us to sit, particularly because we're going to be, again, pretty silent, pretty quiet, right? And do that on our own. So I'll start hearing conversation. I have a lot of empathy for that because I'm an extroverted personality and generally would prefer to be the person having that conversation. But for our purposes, it really is, again, important that we start this process by doing a little bit of work on our own. I'm going to, after we do that work on our own, invite you to do some work in a partnership with another person. So that time will come. You will definitely get to have some conversation. This approach also then respects the fact that each of us reflect in different ways. So some of you in the room might be saying, I actually really enjoy written reflection because I'm a person that journals or I'm a blogger, right? And so this gives us multiple ways to engage in this process. Some that might be really inclined to people that write, and some might be inclined to ways that people speak. So I'm going to time you as you work on answering some of these questions. These questions are big picture questions. They are designed to get you to think deeply about who you are. So they may be tough to answer, and that's completely okay. But each question has a lot of utility in forcing us to think deeply about things like what makes up who I am. So what are my values? What are my beliefs? What are the quotes that I reference that guide who I am? What are 1 or 2 pinnacle learning experiences in my life? So when I think about times when I've been deeply impacted or changed, what are those experiences? So what I'm looking for is not that you have to be writing a lot, although you can, but that what you're writing has significance. So I'm looking for you to move beyond listing out, for example, 15 different values that you have. I'm looking for a real clear articulation of what those core principles, beliefs, values, drivers are that are inherent everywhere you show up.
I'm not necessarily looking for this to be a narcissistic endeavor. And so what I mean by that is I don't want any of you to feel like you have to pick great experiences, right? Times when you were having a wonderful impact. You can actually choose experiences that were really challenging. And in fact, I would say that generally a lot of growth comes out of adversity, right? Growth comes out of challenge. And so this is an opportunity for us to think about those experiences too. So there are 4 questions on your handout. I'm going to time you. It's going to be quiet in this room, even if it's a little uncomfortable. And then after we do some individual written reflection, I'll tell you what's going to happen next. Sound good? Okay, great. Thank you. Feeling? Good? We're tackling some deep stuff here, right? Does it feel a little bit challenging maybe to articulate who you are? Yeah, it is. It is. Absolutely. So the next step in this process is actually deriving themes across the answers to your questions. And this is something that we're going to do in dyad, so we're going to do with a partner. So for the people that will take on the listening role, each of you will take on a listening role, and each of you will take on a speaking role. But right now, for the listeners in the room, this is going to be an exercise in what I like to call deep listening. So you're not listening for commiseration, right? You're not listening to say, oh, I had experience just like that, or I feel that way too. You may feel that way, but that's not what this is designed to do. And this is not an exercise in active listening, so you're not necessarily listening for understanding. What you're listening for is insight and to help the other person generate self-knowledge. So based on the answers to your questions, these are the overarching themes that I'm hearing. When you talk about wanting to help people, so I hear that a lot in my role in the Career Center, for example. I want to help people. I want you to articulate to me more specifically what that means. Because as you can imagine, when we say I want to help people, that starts to feel very cliche very quickly, right? So we want to move past the vague and into the specific. So your task as the listeners is largely twofold. One, it's to engage in a deep listening process to help your partner make sense of the themes and patterns across their different answers. 2 is to help them clarify their meaning. So in instances where you're hearing things that sound vague, or where you want them to unpack something a little bit more, you're going to help them to do that. Okay. Sound like fun? Okay, I've yet to meet the person that's like, this sounds like so much fun, but it is extraordinarily meaningful. So that's the good news. So everyone partner up, and I'm going to take a look around the room to ensure that we have partnerships, dyads, and in an instance where we need a triad, I'll probably come up and give you a little bit of different instruction. So can people start to kind of look at someone and say, yeah, we can work together, so I can see what the situation is in case we need to. So if you are a person without a partner, raise your hand. So how about one person comes here and that table. Back together. It's a large group. There's a little bit of debriefing / next steps. So you all have engaged in an iterative process of reflective practice. That's cool, right? Like bragging rights. You're gonna go to your friends and say, on a Friday night, I did some iterative reflective practice. The cool kids are doing it. So the third thing that we're going to do now is take this iterative process and apply it thematically. So if you want to turn your worksheets over, there is a spot for you to now take the combination of the written reflective work that you did on your own, coupled with the verbal reflection that you did with a partner. Because what we know is that when we speak our answers, when we give them voice, that's another way in which we are engaged in meaning making. We are further clarifying, enhancing, adding nuance to our stories when we speak them out loud. And then we had a third level of reflection in that someone helped us derive meaning of those experiences. So now we're going to take the combination of those 3 forms of meaning making, and we're going to take just a few minutes, if you haven't already, to jot down at least 3 themes that answer the question, what motivates you? What's your understanding of yourself? How would you describe who you are? So we're going to do this just for a few minutes, and then I'm going to move you right into the last step of our process and time together today, okay? I would like to invite any of you that want to share a theme to do so. So would anyone like to share a theme about who they are? Yes.
Artful expression.
Others?
I want to share my privilege.
Can you explain a little bit more what that means?
I've been very fortunate and privileged in my life, and I want to give back to the community.
Great, thank you. Anyone else want to share a theme?
I really value like commitment and dependability.
The last thing that we're going to do together today is think about application. So I've had all of you really rapidly dig deep with me, and I want to give you some kudos for doing that, because this is hard work, right? We could be doing this for, in and of itself, hours and hours. In fact, surprise, you're going to be here till midnight. To practice. No, but we can be doing this for a long time. In fact, we should be reflective people, right? There's a lot of value in being reflective individuals. But for our time together, the last thing that we're going to do, and I see that some of you have already started it, and that's completely okay, is we're going to apply our self-knowledge and insights to the way that we engage, motivate, think about our community engagement. So this last piece at the bottom of the second page of your worksheet is around crafting a concise statement. And I use concise for a reason. So we're looking for a lot of oomph in a little bit of text around how the self-knowledge that you've employed about your motivations, who you are, how those understandings are going to be embedded in and embodied within your approach to purposeful engagement. So I'm going to time you once more. This is the last thing that we're going to do together, and then we're going to have a little bit of transition time before our next presenter comes up. Sound good? All right, so I'll put a timer on, take a few minutes, and then we will be back. At the end of today, for instance, you will go back to this statement and most likely change it based on what you learn in the next session, for example. Or that in a week from now you'll take it out, or 2 weeks from now, or 2 months from now, or 6 months from now. So I know that, and I encourage that, in fact. And so I'm really hopeful that this provided some ways of thinking about yourself and how that self connects to this body of work. And I appreciate all of your engagement, because that really matters when you're standing up in front of the room, right? And helping people to do this work. And that is all I have. So we'll take a quick break, right? And we'll come back together for our next speaker. All right, thank you so much.
To sign, which it means for change. So something that's changed for you, and that you can kind of think creatively about what that means. Something that's changed about what you believe, something that's changed about what you hope to do. What's a change that's come out of the different workshops and people that you listened through today? And then the last one would be a question. What is a question you still have? What is a question you want to pose to the group you work with here at U of M when engaging with communities? What's a question you hope to ask a community when you go? And just take some time to jot down a few of those. We won't take terribly long to do this. But thinking through those things, how is what you listened to today impacted, made you think of something positive, something that'll change, and something that's a question for you? Share with each other. So just kind of popcorn sharing with people at your table. What were some of the positive things that you got out of it? What are things that are changes in what you want to do, changes in the way you see things? And what are some questions that you have? So just take a minute to kind of share those out.
And with those partners that you'll be working with. I also heard people discussing cultural humility and ways that they can be more humble in those cultural settings. And so I want you to look over that purposeful community statement, or purposeful engagement statement that you made with Amy. So if everybody can pull that out, it was on the back. It was the very last question. And go ahead and read that again. See if anything's changed. Maybe you have a word or a sentence to change or to kind of look through. Great, yes, I see people adding things and making changes. So when you first registered for this program, all of you put into 6 words what you thought purposeful community engagement was. Does anybody remember those words? I know they're hard to remember, so we have them here in a word bubble, and we mash them all together, and you can notice that those words that were used most often are the bigger ones. So obviously, most talked about when thinking of community engagement is community, right? Yeah, community right down here. What are some other words you see? Sustainable. Great. Positive. What else? Change. Change is up to a lot of you thought change was purposeful community engagement. Do you see your word up there that you might have put? Anybody willing to share one of those 6 words that they put up that they recognize?
I think I used impact.
Impact. Great. Yes.
Empower.
Empower. Wonderful. And why did you use that word empower?
Because I feel like creating change that'll last, you have to empower the people to be able to do it when you're gone. And it's all about working with them and making sure they can do it so they can carry it on.
Yes, so in all the reflections and activities we've done today, I'm sure you could think of 6 more words or 6 different words, or maybe you do have the 6 same words. But what we're going to do is we're going to work in dyads or pairs, and you are going to come up with 6 words after all this processing that you can describe as purposeful community engagement. All right, and to showcase those, we're going to use Pull Everywhere. And has anybody used Pull Everywhere before? Okay, basically, so after you get in your pairs, you'll use either a smartphone or a tablet, and you can go to this website here, pollev.com/impact15, or if you don't have a smartphone, you can just text Impact 15 to 37607, and then from there you can join. And then, so to this, you're going to work with your partner, get in your pair group, and come up with 6 words, and text or write it in that URL to share with the group. All right? And these are anonymous, so nobody will know that you're the one that wrote that. So, and then we'll just look at those and see what people came up with. That's where we began. So when we first started, some people might not have understood the concept. They started putting 1 word. All right, that's usually how things start, right? We usually just put 1, 2 words. Those darn hippos, of course. And then I think people really started to think and go through those 6 words, because 6 words isn't a lot. So it's hard to put together a sentence or even just 6 separate words together to make something mean purposeful community impact. So we have respecting and listening to a community. All right? Meeting people where they're at. Lovingly invite the unleashing of potential. I thought that one was very poetic. It's very visual. I can see that happening. Productive and impactful alliances between across communities. Impactful, productive. Sustainable. Collaboration, respect, cultural humility. Sustainable, sustainable. Community. Those damn hippies. It's a set of hippos. That was you guys? So I'm sure if we were to put these words into a bubble, I think we would come up with a lot of the same things. Sustainable, community, but I hope that throughout this process you're able to take away a few extra things to include when you interact with those community partners. I know Katie's gonna.
So I thought it was neat to kind of see what popped up. One of the things that stood out to me, someone had used engaged learner, and I think learner is a really great way of being engaged. So not just that we're providing stuff, but we're taking back as well and taking in. And so I guess the one thing I just wanted to kind of leave you with is a story of one of the social work students that went abroad last summer. And people sometimes ask me, so you work in this Office of Global Activities, what's your job? And there's lots of different ways that I can kind of explain my job. So there's lots of different things that are part of it. But one of the things I think that best characterizes it is helping people manage their expectations. So I help prepare students to grow abroad. And a lot of that is helping them to be flexible when things don't go the way that they think they will. And to manage their expectations. And that doesn't mean I'm going to give you the expectations of exactly what you should do. So you're going to India, you think you're going to do this, but I know what the project's really like, and I can tell you this is exactly what will happen to you. That's not helping you manage your expectations by letting you know what to expect, but rather it's helping you figure out how to respond and be flexible when things don't work out the way that you think that they might. And that's exactly what happened to one of our students last year. And she didn't share this with me during the summer while it was happening. She shared it in a panel, actually, for return students, talking to students that were hoping to go abroad for this coming year. And she said she was a student, she'd never actually been abroad before. And she was extremely excited. She'd done all this research, and she was going to go to Tanzania, and she was going to do a service project there for 3 weeks. She, did all this research about which organization she wanted to go with, what type of work they'd be doing. And here in social work, she was studying aging. So she's working with older adults. And so she had all these ideas about her classroom knowledge that she had, the theories. She'd done a field placement here in a local community organization with aging adults. And she had all these great ideas about what she was going to do when she got there. And she got there on day one, and they, gave her a tour around, and they said, "We're so glad you're here." And she said, "Okay, what can I do this afternoon?" And they said, "Well, today in the community room, we have some of the older women that are coming, and we'd like you to paint their nails." And she's like, "Great!" So she, goes in, paints their nails, and has a good time talking to people. And it's a pretty good first afternoon, right? She's jet lagged, all that, but she's there and she's ready to go. So she comes back the next day and she asks, "What can I do today?" And they're like, "Well, we have some women coming in that want their nails painted, so we'd like you to paint their nails." She was like, "Okay," so she does this. And you can see where this is going, right? So it's the first week, and so far that's all she's done, right? They just keep saying, like, "We have this, and we have these women that come in, and they really love it, and you did such a nice job, and so we'd like you to do that." And she's trying to kind of find the space to, where can I, enact these ideas that I had. I had these ideas about different groups that we could run with these older women, and she's just not kind of finding the space, right? So day after day, she's painting the nails, and at first she's, by the second week, she's pretty frustrated. She's like, I came here, I'm a master's student, I have, these social work skills, I've come from the US, I've come to help, and I'm not being able to help, right? I'm not doing what I wanted to do. And then she said by the time that she got to the last week, she realized this is what the community wanted, right? So that she realized that this is what they were asking for. And in taking the time to sit down with the women, to paint their nails, to listen to their stories, she learned way more than she would have if she just came in there and tried to bring her ideas and bring her, she had these ideas for different groups that could be run and all of that. And she said, by the time I left, I realized I did exactly what I needed to do. And in part, that was what the community wanted her to do, right? But it was also taking that time to stop and listen and learn from the community. And by the end, she said it was so easy. She was worried, the second week, like, how am I going to be able to write this paper? I'm supposed to be getting credit for this experience, and I'm not doing anything. And by the time she ended, she said it was really easy to write a paper about, what she had learned and what she knew about the aging system in this other country. And so what I invite you to do is just not miss those opportunities to do something that's different than what you thought was going to happen. It's different than what you came there to do, but it may be what the community wants you to do, or it may be the best way of engaging with them. And so just to not miss those opportunities and take advantage of them. So with that, I'll turn it over to Bree. She's got just a couple of logistics as we get up here.
Yeah, what a great story.
Just a few really brief things. I just want to again express my gratitude and thankfulness that you're here for about 4 hours on a Friday afternoon. I know that you're all busy folks and really trying to get away from that culture busy and be present. And just really appreciate your presence and being fully engaged here today. So thank you. I want to thank again all of our fantastic presenters and organizers in the room. Katie, Brandon, Bill working the camera, Audrey, Danielle, Rupal, Sarah helping us over there with registration, as well as Shari and Amy who had to leave us a little bit early, and other folks who helped make today a reality. So thanks to them. A couple little notes. We have lots of fabulous Jerusalem garden left, so take a sandwich home. Bring one for your roommate. Feel free. We don't want any of that left over, so please take some with you as you leave. We have the fabulous evaluations on the back. This is a pilot event, so your feedback is really helpful to us. Things that could be changed, things that went well. Would really encourage you to fill that out and drop it off at the front with Sarah. And when you drop off your eval, you get a fantastic book that Rupal mentioned earlier with some of those stories. And just so you all know that there's a lot of places on campus that after today, you can continue this conversation and this journey. So we will be sending out our team an email with some resources where you might connect on campus, reference some of the TED Talks that were mentioned today if you were interested in following up with those. We have some materials in the back of the room, again on the registration table from our offices. I'm happy personally to speak with anyone after if they're interested in learning more about the Ginsberg Center. And so again, thank you for being here. Grab a sandwich, fill out the eval. It's been a pleasure. Thank you.